If you've ever seen a company just completely shake up its industry, not just by getting bigger, but by being fundamentally different, oh, that's strategic marketing firing on all cylinders. Think about T-Mobile's uncarrier strategy. For years, AT&T and T and Verizon kind of called the shots, right? With those really restrictive long-term contracts, hidden fees. Then T-Mobile just strides in and basically tears up the old playbook. No more contracts. Pricing suddenly became crystal clear. They even got rid of global roaming charges, which was a huge pain point for customers, and threw in things like free Wi-Fi calling and video streaming. Just amazing.
Yeah, that kind of disruption, it doesn't just happen by accident. It's a total masterclass in carving out a really unique, really compelling position in the market. But how exactly do companies pull that off? How do they not just compete, but truly, genuinely stand out when everyone else is shouting too? That's what we want to unpack today.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is really to peel back the layers on two absolutely core marketing concepts: value proposition and positioning. We're leaning heavily on the insights from Kotler, Keller, and Chernev's marketing management, a foundational text. Think of this as your shortcut, kind of, to understanding not just what these ideas are, but how brands actually use them strategically. How they connect with you, the customer, and ultimately why you end up choosing one brand over another. We'll dig into those key strategic questions. How do companies even figure out the value they offer? And then, how do they craft that unique space for their brand inside your mind? What makes them similar enough to be considered, but different enough to be chosen? Those points of parity and difference. And crucially, how do they build advantages that actually last? It's all about mastering that unique place.
And for you listening in, this is about getting that knowledge efficiently but deeply, moving past just the definitions to the strategic thinking behind it all. Get ready for some proper aha moments because honestly, these concepts touch almost every business decision and, frankly, every consumer choice you make. COE defining the core, value proposition, and positioning. Okay, so let's start right at the foundation: customer behavior. What is it that fundamentally drives us as customers to pick one thing over another?
Well, at the end of the day, most of us act as value maximizers. Within the limits of what we know, what we can actually get our hands on, and what we can afford, we tend to choose the option we believe gives us the highest perceived value. And that leads us straight into the customer value proposition. It's essentially the whole package, the entire cluster of benefits a company promises to deliver, all weighed against the cost you take on money, yes, but also time, effort, psychological cost. Yeah, and Kotler, Keller, and Chernev make a great point that this value isn't just one thing. We often think of functional value, right? Like a reliable printer for the office or maybe a durable kitchen appliance. Does the job. But it's crucial to see how that interacts with other types of value. Take psychological value. This taps into emotional benefits, emotional costs, the pure joy of driving a really high-performance car maybe, or the social status you feel from a luxury brand. This is huge in categories like fashion or high-end travel, where that emotional connection is often the main driver. And then, of course, there's monetary value. Pretty straightforward: price, discounts, financial rewards, loyalty points. This becomes super important in, say, commoditized categories where the products themselves are very, very similar. So for marketers, the strategic lever is figuring out how to boost that overall value. You either enhance the benefits, functional, psychological, monetary, or you find smart ways to reduce the costs for the customer.
That makes total sense. So, okay, if the value proposition is that big, comprehensive promise of everything you're going to get, then what exactly is positioning? How does that promise actually stick in our minds?
Right, positioning is the really strategic act of designing a company's offering and image to occupy a distinctive place in the minds of the target market. So while the value prop is the whole benefit cost picture, positioning zooms in. It focuses on the specific key benefits that give you, the customer, a clear, compelling reason to choose this brand instead of all the others out there. And it really needs to hit home on both rational and emotional levels. Think about Mederma, the scar treatment. Functionally, yeah, it treats scars. But they realized the true positioning was about helping women regain self-esteem. So their messaging shifted. They hit that emotional core. That's powerful. Or another great one is Kate Spade. Sure, the bags are functional, well-designed. But the positioning, it cultivates this whole vibe being the most interesting person in the room. It's vibrant, witty, and that brand feeling, that essence, it stretches across their clothes, their jewelry, even how they run their website and social media. It's consistent, rooted in those signature patterns, colors, that New York feel.
Right, and that idea of a truly distinctive mental space brings up a really useful tool you mentioned, the brand substitution test. Like, if you took the Kate Spade logo off their ads and slapped on, say, a Tory Burch or a Coach logo, would the message still work? Would it still feel right? If it does, well, that suggests Kate Spade maybe hasn't carved out a truly unique spot yet. It really pushes brands to ask, is our image genuinely ours, or could it belong to anyone in our category?
Absolutely. A really strong positioning is always looking forward, but it has to be achievable, right? It needs room to grow.
Hmm?
And most importantly, it acts like the North Star for all your marketing strategy. It's the bedrock you build on before you even start thinking about, how you're similar to or different from the competition. The strategic playbook, frame of reference, POPs and PODs.
Okay, so before a company can even start talking about being unique, they've got to define the playing field, right? Who are they actually up against? That sounds like this frame of reference idea.
Precisely. Your competitive frame of reference basically defines which other products or services your brand is competing with, the ones that consumers see as close substitutes. And this is directly tied to who your target market is. So, like, PepsiCo sees Coxsacani as a key competitor for Aquafina. Wells Fargo looks at Bank of America. It's often straightforward category membership. You're both banks. You're both bottled waters. But the really strategic thinking comes in when you realize competition can be much broader than just the obvious rivals. Think about Power Bar. Initially, it was just against other energy bars. But as that market grew, it split into all these subcategories: bars for women, high-protein bars, meal replacement bars. Suddenly, the competitive set got way bigger. And what's really fascinating is how some companies strategically choose their frame to make themselves look better. The UK's Automobile Association, the AA, they successfully position themselves as the fourth emergency service, right alongside police, fire, ambulance. That instantly conveys essential reliability. Well, think about the U.S. Armed Forces.
They shifted recruitment messaging to focus on leadership skills that help them compete more effectively against private companies for talented young people. It's about consciously shaping how consumers categorize you.
This is where it gets really juicy for me. How do you manage to fit in and stand out at the same time? You need those basic credentials to even be in the game, but you also need something special. That leads us right into points of difference, PODs, and points of parity, POPs. How does that work?
Exactly. So points of difference, PODs. These are the attributes or benefits that truly set your offering apart. Things consumers strongly link to your brand, they like them, and crucially, they believe they can't get them, or at least not as well, from a competitor. Think Louis Vuitton, that distinct design heritage is a POD. Or Energizer, their whole thing is being the longest-lasting battery. That's their claim. Getting strong PODs right can have massive financial benefits, driving preference, allowing premium prices. And a really important POD these days is brand authenticity. Consumers increasingly value brands they see as true to themselves, true to their roots. Think Hershey's, Kraft, Welch's. They often emphasize things like local sourcing to build that authentic feel. Now, strong brands often have multiple PODs. Apple. You've got design, ease of use, that slightly rebellious attitude. Nike, performance, innovation, winning. But the challenge is making those PODs truly impactful. Consider method products. Cleaning products seems like a boring category, right? But they create a powerful PODs through, first, that sleek, beautiful packaging, then pleasant, non-chemical fragrances.
And a huge commitment to sustainability, eco-friendly, biodegradable, non-toxic. It cleverly got into Target, built a community online, people against dirty. It just shows you can differentiate even in a commodity space if you're smart about your PODs. But for a POD to really work, it needs to pass three key tests. First, is it desirable to the consumer? Is it relevant? Does it offer a compelling reason to believe? Like Mountain Dew's extra caffeine, that's a desirable energy boost for its audience. Second, is it deliverable by the company? Do you actually have the resources, the commitment, the internal alignment to consistently deliver on that promise? You need to back it up. And ideally, you want it to be preemptive, defensible, hard for others to copy. And third, critically, is it differentiating from competitors? Is it genuinely distinct? Is it superior? Splenda stood out from Equal and Sweet and Low because it was derived from sugar. That was a powerful differentiator. Monster Energy shook things up, not just with flavor, but with that bigger 16-ounce can creating a new format POD.
Okay, PODs are about standing out, being unique. So what about POPs? What are these points of parity doing?
Right. Points of parity, POPs, are those attributes or benefits that are not necessarily unique. They're often shared with other brands in the category. Think of them as the common ground. They come in a few flavors. Category POPs are the absolute must-haves, the basic requirements to even be considered a legitimate player. A travel agency has to be able to book flights and hotels, right? That's just table stakes. Then you have correlational POPs. These are the potentially negative things people might assume because of a positive attribute. Like if something is really, really cheap, people might worry it's low quality. Or if it tastes amazing, they might assume it's high in calories. Brands sometimes need to address these implied negatives. And finally, competitive POPs. These are designed specifically to neutralize a competitor's POD. You're trying to overcome a perceived weakness you have compared to them. The classic example here is Miller Lite. Their big POD, their unique selling point, was less filling, but it's beer. It also had to have the POP that it tastes great. Dennis. They cleverly used those ads with ex-athletes arguing about which was more important, reinforcing both aspects with the tagline.
Everything you've always wanted in a beer and less. Genius. The key insight with POPs is you don't usually need to be the best on them. You just need to be good enough. You need to be within what marketers call the zone of tolerance. We see this dance all the time. Visa's POD is basically accepted everywhere. Amex's POD is prestige, service. So what do? Visa introduces gold and platinum cards to get a POP on prestige. Amex works hard to get more merchants to accept their cards, aiming for a POP on acceptance. They're constantly trying to blunt each other's advantages.
Wow, it really is a strategic dance, isn't it? And it sounds like it gets even trickier if a brand is playing in multiple arenas at once. You mentioned Starbucks. They're competing with fast food, but also home coffee and local cafes. That must mean juggling different POPs and PODs for each context.
It absolutely does. And sometimes companies try what's called straddle positioning, where they try to belong to two categories at the same time. Subway is a fantastic example. They position themselves for both healthy and good-tasting sandwiches. So against fast food places like McDonald's, their POD is health, but they need a POP on taste. Against dedicated health food spots, their POD is taste, but they need a POP on health. They straddle that line. BMW did this brilliantly in the US. They carved out a space as offering both luxury and performance. The ultimate driving machine captured that perfectly. It wasn't just luxury, it wasn't just performance, it was a unique combination. But there's a real risk here. If you're not credible in delivering on both sets of POPs and PODs, you can end up not being seen as legitimate in either category. Some of those early PDAs, like the Palm Pilot or the Apple Newton, arguably tried to do too much, be a calendar, a notepad, a communicator, and maybe didn't nail any single function well enough initially. It's a tough balancing act. 3. Sustaining advantage in communicating the message.
Okay, so let's say you've done the hard work. You've found your spot, defined your POPs and PODs, maybe you're even successfully straddling categories. But the market never sleeps, right? How do you keep that advantage? What about sustainable competitive advantage? That sounds crucial, but maybe elusive.
You've absolutely hit on a core challenge. The truth is, very few competitive advantages are inherently sustainable forever. Things change too fast. Instead, they're often leverageable. That means a company can use an existing advantage, like Microsoft used its Windows dominance, as a springboard to create new advantages, like with Microsoft Office. So the real goal isn't some static, permanent edge. It's more about continuous innovation. At its heart, a competitive advantage is just a company's ability to do something valuable in ways that competitors cannot, or perhaps will not, match. Now, there are a few main strategic paths to try and build that advantage. First, you can differentiate on an existing attribute that customers value. This is classic stuff. Gillette focuses on the quality of the shave. Dollar Shave Club hammers on price. Zappos is legendary for service. BMW owns the driving experience. Volvo is synonymous with safety. But this gets harder as products in many categories become more and more alike. Think about TVs. The featured differences get smaller all the time. A really insightful example here, though, is Geico. Yes, they differentiate on price. 15 minutes could save you 15%. But their sustainable edge arguably comes from relentlessly building top-of-mind awareness. The gecko, the caveman, the happier than ads, they make themselves the default option you think of first through sheer branding consistency. Okay, second strategy. Introduce a new attribute. This doesn't always mean inventing something totally new from scratch. It can be about tweaking something existing or highlighting something people hadn't focused on before. Thomas's Shoes did this with their buy one, give one model that social responsibility became a key attribute. Uber made cash-free payment a differentiator early on. Nest brought machine learning to thermostats. Method Products, as we said, made design an attribute in cleaning supplies. Apple famously did this with the colorful iMac design. The catch here, though, is that new attributes are rarely sustainable on their own for long. If it's valuable, competitors will copy it. Which brings us to the third and arguably the most powerful long-term strategy. Build a strong brand. This goes way beyond just product features. Think Harley-Davidson. Think Coca-Cola. The brand itself, the image, the emotional connection, the loyalty it inspires, that becomes the advantage, often more important than the physical product specs. Grey Goose Vodka is a fascinating case study. It's essentially a commodity vodka. But they built an incredibly strong brand purely on image, positioning themselves as the world's best tasting vodka, commanding a premium price, even though blind taste tests often show little difference between high-end vodkas. The brand is the sustainable advantage. It drives behavior, makes them a default choice.
Right, the power of the brand itself. So once that strategy and positioning are nailed down internally, how do you make sure everyone else gets it? Your employees, your partners, and most importantly, your target customers. How do you
Yeah.
effectively communicate the offering's positioning?
Yeah, that's critical. And the cornerstone for internal alignment and external messaging is often the positioning statement. It's a concise expression of the target market, the offering, and crucially, the key benefit or point of difference, like Hertz. For busy professionals, Hertz offers a fast, convenient way to rent the right type of car at an airport. Simple, clear. Or Volvo. For safety-conscious upscale families, Volvo offers the safest, most durable automobile in which your family can ride. Again, target and key benefit are crystal clear. Notice they focus on the benefit, not just the features. Dove doesn't just say contains cleansing cream. They say it has 1/4 cleansing cream, because that delivers the benefit of softer, smoother skin. You have to translate features into benefits. You also sometimes need to explicitly communicate category membership. If it's a totally new product or you're trying to reposition, you might need to tell people what box to put you in. But what's really clever is when brands strategically mention categories they don't belong to, specifically to highlight their POD, DiGiorno pizza. It's not delivery, it's DiGiorno. They define themselves against delivery to emphasize their quality for a frozen pizza. HBO did this brilliantly. It's not TV, it's HBO. Instantly position them as premium, different. Ali Bank did a great job with this when they rebranded from GMA. They ran these humorous campaigns, poking fun at traditional banks, helpful people, not machines, to clearly communicate their positioning as simple, direct, and human, which really resonated when people were frustrated with big banks.
That's a smart tactic, defining yourself by what you're not. But what about that classic marketing headache? Communicating conflicting benefits. Customers want it all, low price A&D, high quality, amazing taste A&D, low calories. How do brands tackle that inherent tension?
Ah, yes, the desire for contradictory things. It's a huge challenge. Often it requires genuine innovation. Gore-Tex, for example, developed technology that allowed fabric to be both breathable and waterproof, overcoming that traditional trade-off. Sometimes it's about framing. Royal Philips used the tagline "Sense and Simplicity" to suggest their technology was advanced but also easy to use, tackling that complexity fear head-on. And increasingly, companies are realizing the power of positioning as storytelling or narrative branding. People just connect with stories much more deeply than they do with feature lists. Jim Beam, the bourbon brand, actually worked with The Moth, the storytelling organization, to help craft their brand narrative thinking about the setting, the characters, the plot arc, the language. It's about creating this rich, engaging story around the brand that builds an emotional connection and that can be incredibly effective in differentiating. 4. Real-world applications, marketing spotlights.
This has been a fantastic breakdown of the theory and strategy. Now, let's bring it to life with some really powerful real-world examples. First up, let's look at Unilever. They manage Axe and Dove, two brands that seem almost polar opposites. How does that work?
Unilever is truly a masterclass in managing a diverse brand portfolio and using very targeted marketing communications. It's fascinating to compare Axe, or Lynx in some places, and Dove. When Axe launched in the US back in 2002, its target was crystal clear. The insecure novice, young guys, basically, looking for a confidence boost, especially with dating. Their early advertising was, well, it's pretty out there. Full of humor, very overt sexual themes. The average guy uses Axe and suddenly he's irresistible. They used hyperbole, non-traditional channels like online videos, games, mobile apps. They partnered with MTV, ESPN, even Playboy. They really understood where to reach that specific young male audience and what anxieties to tap into. It was bold, but what's really insightful is how Axe has evolved. They started by leaning into, maybe even celebrating, certain male stereotypes, but their more recent campaigns like Find Your Magic or that Is It Okay for Guys ad based on real Google searches about male insecurities. They've directly challenged those older norms of masculinity. It shows a really smart strategic adaptation to changing cultural conversations and consumer attitudes. It proves a brand can redefine its position over time. Then you flip the coin completely, and you have Dove. In 2003, they launched the campaign for Real Beauty. This was revolutionary at the time. Instead of just talking about moisturizing cream, they started a global conversation about beauty standards, featuring real women, different shapes, sizes, ages, ethnicities, and challenging stereotypes head-on with things like the Wrinkled or Wonderful billboards. The strategic genius was tapping into this growing desire among women for authenticity, for seeing themselves represented, for pushing back against unrealistic media ideals. And their use of digital was brilliant. Those viral short films, Evolution, showing the insane transformation involved in a typical beauty ad, or sketches where women describe themselves much less kindly than strangers did. They struck such a chord emotionally. reached millions globally, and cemented Dove's positioning.
It really is astonishing seeing those two strategies side by side from the same company. Axe's early stuff, frankly, could seem pretty objectifying, while Dove was championing this message of real beauty and self-acceptance. Doesn't that create some kind of internal conflict or hypocrisy for Unilever? Or is there a bigger picture?
That's a fair question. From a portfolio perspective, though, it demonstrates how a large company can successfully manage brands with very different, even seemingly contradictory, positionings. The key is that each brand strategy has to be laser-focused on its specific target audience and its unique value proposition for that group. Both Axe and Dove became market leaders because they deeply understood their respective consumer bases and crafted messages that resonated powerfully, even if those messages were worlds apart. Axe connected with young men's aspirations and anxieties. Dove connected with women's desire for self-esteem and authenticity. It shows that different segments need fundamentally different value propositions.
That's a great perspective on managing a diverse portfolio. Okay, let's switch gears to another fascinating case. First Direct. This is a UK bank that has really navigated shifts in positioning over decades. Tell us about their journey.
First Direct is a brilliant example of long-term strategic adaptation. They launched back in the late 1980s in the UK, a time when banking was, well, pretty stuffy. Think long queues, intimidating bank managers, limited hours. Inspired by telephone banking in the U.S., its parent company, Midland Bank, later part of HSBC, launched First Direct as a telephone-only bank, radical at the time. Their initial positioning was all about pioneering amazing service. They targeted younger, professional customers, offered 204/7 service. You could literally call them on Christmas Day. And their advertising was unconventional, black and white, provocative stuff like banking without branches. It's extraordinary. Really emphasized their difference in customer focus. What was really forward-thinking about First Direct was how early they embraced digital. They were testing internet banking way back in 1997, rolled out SMS alerts in 99, mobile banking by 2006. Fast forward to 2019, and something like 98% of their customer interactions were digital. So they clearly linked their digital marketing evolution to how customers were actually behaving. And it worked. They consistently had sky-high customer satisfaction, incredible loyalty. Many original customers are still with them today. But here's the critical strategic pivot. Over time, great customer service stopped being a unique differentiator. Other banks caught up. Service levels improved across the board. So First Direct had to adapt. Around 2017, they explicitly shifted their positioning to be a modern digital bank. The focus moved to their app, their tech innovation. They even had these striking ads, still black and white, but featuring an astronaut leaping around conveying difference through cutting-edge tech. And then more recently, around 2019-2020, they evolved again, emphasizing financial wellness. This tapped into broader societal trends around health, well-being, taking control. It shows incredibly dynamic thinking, constantly reevaluating their value proposition and positioning in light of market changes. Their continued success and profitability really underscore the power of having a clear yet adaptable brand positioning strategy over the long haul. Outro.
So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway? Crafting that compelling position in the market, it's not just about the product or service itself, is it? It's fundamentally about how you strategically define yourself and the specific value you offer inside the minds of your audience. And it's clearly not a one-and-done thing. It's this continuous, dynamic process, understanding needs as they evolve, keeping an eye on competitors, and always refining how you communicate your unique promise.
Absolutely. And as you've heard today, value proposition and positioning, they're not static blueprints. They are living, breathing strategies that have to adapt. In this world of just constant change, relentless information overload, the companies that truly thrive are the ones constantly asking, what does value mean to you, the customer, right now? And how can we find fresh, relevant ways to stand out from the noise? So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Looking ahead, what new attributes or benefits do you think will define the next wave of market leaders? And how will they position themselves to capture your attention and ultimately your loyalty?
That's a fantastic question to mull over. Thank you so much for walking us through all of that today. Really insightful. And a warm thank you from the Last Minute Lecture team.